"Samantha, I gave everything to your brother," he said. For a moment, I thought I'd misheard him. The words felt like they came from a nightmare, someone else's nightmare, not mine. I gripped my phone tighter, the sharp sting of betrayal cutting through me. My father's voice was unnervingly calm, too calm, as if he wasn't dismantling the entire foundation of my life with a single sentence, as if everything I'd worked for in the past 20 years meant absolutely nothing. I forced myself to swallow the knot rising in my throat. The view outside my office window blurred as my mind raced, trying to process the weight of what he'd just said. The empire we'd built together, the one I had sacrificed everything for, was no longer mine. For years, I'd believed I was the backbone of Mitchell Enterprises. I thought my father saw me as his equal, the one who would continue our legacy. I was wrong. "Thanks for letting me know," I said, my voice oddly calm. Even I could hear my father falter on the other end. He'd been expecting something, maybe a scream, a plea, or even a fight, but I gave him none of that. "Samantha, I know this might seem unfair," he began, but I didn't wait to hear more. I hung up. The silence that filled my office was suffocating, the weight of everything crashing down on me, heavier than anything I'd ever had to face. But then, something inside me shifted. I took a slow, deliberate breath, steadying the fire that had ignited in my chest. He thinks it's over. He's wrong. Mitchell Enterprises wasn't just a business to me. It was my father's dream, and it was my life. I had been there since the start, working by his side as we climbed from nothing. At 19, I officially joined the company. While my father had the vision, I was the one who made it scalable. I built our investment strategies, expanded our portfolio, and pulled us back from the edge of financial ruin more times than I could count. Yet, over the past year, things had changed. My father began leaving me out of key meetings. Financial reports stopped showing up on my desk. Important decisions were suddenly being made behind closed doors, with my brother Ryan at the center of it all. Ryan, the golden child, the son my father had always wanted. While I spent my 20s in boardrooms and investor meetings, Ryan spent his in nightclubs and luxury resorts, burning through his trust fund as if it would never run out. He never cared about the company. He never earned his place in it. But somehow, my father had chosen him over me. I should have seen it coming. The missing reports, the hushed conversations between my father and his lawyers, the way Ryan suddenly seemed interested in the company after years of neglect. I had been too trusting, too busy running the business to notice the ground shifting beneath my feet. And now, they thought they had taken everything from me. I stared at the polished mahogany desk in front of me, my fingers tapping rhythmically against its smooth surface. My mind was already at work, shifting through years of contracts, legal structures, and contingency plans. What my father didn't realize, and what Ryan hadn't figured out, was that I had never been blind to the game. I reached for the black notebook I kept in my desk drawer. Inside were the real records, the ones I'd kept separate from the official books. Every major decision, every hidden liability, every backroom deal my father had made. It was all here. If he thought he could just push me out and walk away without consequences, he was sorely mistaken. I had built this company with my blood, sweat, and sacrifice. I knew every weak spot, every pressure point, and I wasn't going to let them win. I leaned back in my chair and stared out at the city skyline. This was where my father had made his second mistake, assuming I'd crumble. I wasn't grieving the loss. I was preparing for war. With one last look at my phone, I stood up, adjusting the sleeves of my blazer. This wasn't over. It had only just begun. I left the office early that day, not because I was overwhelmed, not because I needed time to process, but because I needed to think. The truth was, I had already seen this coming. I drove in silence, gripping the steering wheel so tightly that my knuckles turned white. The streets of Austin blurred past me, a city I had spent years making my mark in, a city that now felt different, colder. My father had cut me out. Ryan had won, or so they thought. I pulled into my driveway, killed the engine, and sat there for a moment, letting the silence settle around me. The house felt empty, because it was. I had never made time for a life outside the company. While my friends were getting married, having kids, and taking vacations, I had been working 16-hour days, making sure Mitchell Enterprises didn't collapse under the weight of my father's outdated strategies. And now, I had nothing to show for it. Or at least, that's what they wanted me to believe. I walked inside, tossed my keys onto the counter, and made my way to the study. The walls were lined with books on business strategy, negotiations, the things I had devoted my life to. But tonight, they felt useless. Instead, I grabbed the one thing that had never let me down: my notebook. I flipped it open, scanning the pages filled with years of notes, deals my father had made, hidden accounts, things he never thought I'd notice. I knew my father's weaknesses. And if he had taught me anything, it was that power didn't belong to the one with the biggest empire. It belonged to the one who knew how to burn it all down. I couldn't help but reflect on my childhood, the lessons my father had ingrained in me about loyalty, about family. He had raised me on stories of resilience, perseverance, and earning your place in the world. But when it came down to it, he handed everything over to Ryan, a man who had done nothing to earn it. This wasn't just about money, it was about respect. And in that moment, my father made a fatal error. He completely underestimated me. I grabbed my phone, scrolling through my contacts until I landed on the one name I needed: Daniel Lewis. He wasn't just my father's oldest friend. He was the man who helped him secure the very first round of funding when Mitchell Enterprises was little more than an idea on a napkin. Daniel had always believed in me, more so than my own father ever had. I hit call. "Samantha," Daniel answered quickly, his voice warm but laced with caution. "It's been a while." "I need to meet," I said, cutting straight to the chase. "It's about my father." There was a slight pause on the other end of the line before he sighed. I figured something was going on. "Meet me at the club in an hour." I ended the call, grabbed my keys, and headed for the door. If my father wanted to rewrite the rules, then so be it. I'd rewrite them too. The private club looked exactly as I remembered, stuffed with men of old money, each of them having built their empires the same way my father had. Daniel sat in the back, nursing a glass of whiskey, his eyes locked on me with that same calculating expression he always wore. "So," he said, swirling the ice in his glass, "tell me what happened." I didn't waste time. I gave him the full story: the call, the betrayal, how my father had handed over an empire to Ryan, a man who hadn't earned it. Daniel listened carefully, nodding here and there, but his face remained an unshifting mask. "And what do you want from me?" he asked, breaking the silence. I leaned in, locking eyes with him. "I want to build something better, and I want to make sure my father and Ryan understand exactly what they've lost." Daniel studied me quietly, then let out a small chuckle. "Your father always said you had my ruthlessness." "Then you know I won't lose," I replied, unflinching. He nodded slowly. "All right, Samantha. So what's your plan?" I exhaled, the fire within me burning hotter than before. My father had taken everything from me. Now it was my turn to take everything from him. Daniel leaned back, his sharp gaze never leaving me. His silence was not indecision. It was pure calculation. I'd seen that look before, back when he and my father were still partners. "You know," he said, swirling his drink, "your father would call this a betrayal." I couldn't help but laugh dryly. "Funny, I thought betrayal was cutting your own daughter out of the company she built." Daniel smirked. "Touché?" I kept my hands folded on the table, my face calm. "I don't just want revenge, Daniel. I want to create something that makes Mitchell Enterprises look like a footnote." He nodded slowly, putting down his drink. "All right then, let's talk strategy." If there was one thing I had learned in the business world, it was that power didn't come from owning something. It came from controlling it. And despite what my father thought, I still had control over more than he realized. I pulled my phone from my pocket, scrolling through my notes. Mitchell Enterprises has a major vulnerability: expansion. The company is over-leveraged. My father and Ryan have been pouring money into new acquisitions, thinking they can grow faster than the market can sustain. But the truth is, they don't have the infrastructure to back it up. Daniel raised an eyebrow. "And how do you know that?" "Because I built the infrastructure." I met his gaze squarely. "I know exactly where the cracks are, and when those cracks widen, the whole thing will come crashing down." Daniel let out a low chuckle. "So, You're not planning to go after them head on. You're letting them destroy themselves. Exactly. For the past year, Mitchell Enterprises had aggressively thrown money into real estate, manufacturing, and supply chain logistics. But my father and Ryan were no visionaries. They didn't understand the industries they were investing in. They were relying on nothing but blind ambition and arrogance, assuming their name alone would guarantee success. But that was a mistake. "And when Mitchell Enterprises starts to struggle," Daniel asked, a smirk playing at the corner of his mouth, "that's when you make your move?" "Exactly," I said, my eyes narrowing with determination. Revenge alone wouldn't be enough. I wanted more than that. I wanted to prove to them that I wasn't just some expendable asset my father could throw away. I wanted to show them that cutting me out was the biggest mistake they'd ever made. I needed funding, resources, and, most importantly, the right people. "I want to start my own firm," I said. "Something lean and strategic, focused on acquisitions that make sense, not just eye-catching headlines, and I want to poach the best talent from Mitchell Enterprises." Daniel let out a laugh and shook his head. "You really are your father's daughter." I smiled, but it was cold. "No, I'm better." For years, I had built the strongest teams at Mitchell Enterprises, trained the sharpest minds. They trusted me. They didn't respect Ryan. And given the chance, I knew exactly where their loyalty would lie. Daniel leaned forward, his interest piqued. "Let me guess, you already have names." I slid my phone across the table. On the screen was a list of top executives, project managers, and financial analysts, the very backbone of Mitchell Enterprises. "These are the people who actually keep the company running," I said, "and I guarantee you half of them would walk if given the right opportunity." Daniel whistled. "You don't waste any time, do you?" "I don't have the luxury of wasting time." Daniel leaned back, considering my proposal. "All right, Samantha, I'm in." Those 3 words were all I needed. Within a week, everything would change. I had secured the initial funding, and Daniel introduced me to investors eager to back a competitor to Mitchell Enterprises, especially one who knew exactly how to tear it down from the inside. The first person I called was Hannah Turner, the head of risk management at Mitchell Enterprises. She had been my mentor for years, someone who had seen firsthand what I'd built and how much I'd sacrificed. "Samantha," she answered right away, her tone both concerned and curious. "I heard what happened. It's a mess. I'm starting something new," I told her, cutting straight to the point, "and I want you on my side." There was a moment of silence. Then she responded, "Tell me where to sign." The pieces began to move swiftly. By the end of the week, I had 4 key people. By the month's end, that number had doubled. And the best part? My father had no idea what was happening. They thought I'd fade into the background, disappear, but they were terribly mistaken. I sat in my new office, staring at the incorporation papers for my new firm. Mitchell Enterprises had taken everything from me, but in return, I had created something far better. I picked up my phone and scrolled to my father's number. For a brief moment, I thought about calling him, letting him know what I was about to do. But then, I smiled to myself and set the phone back down. He'd find out soon enough. The first domino had fallen. In the following weeks, the momentum I'd built turned into a force that couldn't be stopped. More people from Mitchell Enterprises started leaving. Some did so quietly, others made dramatic exits, but all of them with the same goal. They wanted to work with me. I didn't need to poach aggressively. I didn't have to. I knew exactly who felt sidelined, who was frustrated by Ryan's incompetence, and who simply wanted out before the company collapsed under its own weight. And collapse it would. I had spent years watching my father run Mitchell Enterprises, always believing that loyalty and legacy were more important than strategy or innovation. That mindset worked when I was there to balance him out. But with Ryan now running things, it was only a matter of time before the company imploded. The first real blow to Mitchell Enterprises came in the form of a disastrous acquisition deal. For months, the company had been negotiating to acquire Harlan Tech, a mid-sized logistics company that would have strengthened their supply chain control. It was a high-stakes move, one I had originally led before my father cut me out. Now, Ryan had taken over the negotiations and bungled it badly. The headlines said it all. Mitchell Enterprises fumbles key acquisition as CEO's son mishandles deal. Harlan Tech walks away, citing leadership issues at Mitchell Enterprises. I read each article with quiet satisfaction. Ryan had overpromised, misjudged, and ultimately pushed Harlan Tech into a deal with another firm. A firm I had personally helped with the acquisition. A firm that was now aligned with me. It wasn't enough to bring down Mitchell Enterprises just yet, but it was the first visible crack in their foundation. I knew my father was watching it all unfold. 2 days after the Harlan Tech fiasco, the call I'd been expecting finally came. My phone buzzed as I sat in my office, going over expansion plans for my own firm. I glanced at the screen. Dad. I let the phone ring. Just as it was about to go to voicemail, I answered. Samantha. His voice was tight, controlled, but I could hear the tension simmering beneath the surface. I assume you've seen the news? I leaned back in my chair, allowing myself a slow smile. I have. A pause. Did you have something to do with this? I exhaled, letting the silence stretch for a moment before replying. Dad, you made it abundantly clear I was out. Why would I be involved with Mitchell Enterprises? He sighed deeply, the weight of the situation pressing down on him. We need to talk. There it was, the first hint of regret. But I wasn't ready for that conversation. Not yet. I'm busy, I said coolly. You'll have to find another time. Before he could reply, I ended the call. And for the first time in my life, I was the one walking away. That evening, I received a text from Hannah, my mentor turned ally. Ryan's losing it, she wrote. He called an emergency meeting today and blamed internal sabotage. People are starting to wonder if he knows what he's doing. I smirked to myself. Of course, Ryan was panicking. He never handled pressure well. And now, with the media on his back, investors growing uneasy, and key employees jumping ship, he was sinking fast. But I wasn't finished yet. I wasn't just going after Ryan. I was going after everything my father had built. Mitchell Enterprises wasn't just a business. It was an institution, built on decades of reputation and my father's ability to convince everyone that Mitchell Enterprises never failed. But now, that very reputation was crumbling, and all I had to do was sit back and watch their mistakes pull them under. I made my next move. I called Daniel. It's time, I told him. You sure? He asked, his voice steady. Ryan is cracking. My father's doubting him. Investors are getting nervous. If we move now, we can grab some of their biggest contracts before they even realize what's happening. Daniel chuckled softly. You really are ruthless, Samantha. I smiled, though there was no warmth in it. I learned from the best. The trap was set. All I had to do now was wait. The next phase was simple. Further destabilize Mitchell Enterprises, secure key contracts before they could, and wait for my father to fully comprehend what he'd done. For years, I had been the perfect daughter, the loyal heir, the quiet strategist in the shadows. Not anymore. Now, I was going to watch them burn. Ryan was sinking fast. I watched from the sidelines as Mitchell Enterprises, once a powerhouse, once my legacy, began to crumble under the weight of Ryan's incompetence. At first, the decline was slow, a missed deadline here, an underperforming quarter there. But soon, it spiraled out of control, and I made sure I was there to accelerate the process. After the Harlan Tech deal fell apart, Mitchell Enterprises didn't just lose an acquisition, it lost credibility. Investors, once concerned, were now terrified. Then came the departures. At first, it was just a handful of executives, the ones I had personally recruited to my new firm. But before long, the floodgates opened. Key managers, the ones who actually kept the company running, started leaving. Clients hesitated. Contracts that were once considered guarantees suddenly weren't renewed. Investors began calling my father directly, demanding answers. And the best part? I hadn't done a single thing to make it happen. Ryan was ruining the company all on his own. The second call from my father came late at night. I was in my office, reviewing a contract for my firm's latest acquisition, a deal that had once been Mitchell Enterprises' crown jewel. The irony wasn't lost on me. I let the phone ring 3 times before I picked up. Dad, I said, answering coolly. His voice was different this time. It wasn't angry or arrogant. It was desperate. Samantha, listen. We need to talk in person. I leaned back in my chair, tapping my fingers against my desk. What for? There was a pause, followed by a heavy sigh. Ryan is struggling. The board is concerned. There are financial issues that need addressing. Financial issues? I repeated, feigning innocence. Samantha, please. My father's voice softened, something almost unfamiliar in it. I know you're angry, but you're still part of this family. You've always been the smartest one. We need you. There it was. The first time in my life that my father had admitted what I had always known to be true. But it was too late. The next morning, we met in his office. The tension was suffocating. Ryan was already there, sitting stiffly in the chair next to my father's desk. His face was pale, his usual cocky smirk completely absent. He knew. They both knew. Samantha, my father began, we need to restructure the company. The losses have been significant. I folded my arms and gave him a pointed look. Define significant. Another pause, then he slid a folder across the desk. I opened it, and there it was. Mitchell Enterprises was on the brink of bankruptcy. My father, the man who had built an empire from nothing, had let it crumble in less than a year, because he'd handed everything over to the wrong person. I closed the folder, meeting his eyes. What do you want from me? He hesitated. Then, almost painfully, he said, Come back. Help us fix this. I could have laughed. I could have thrown the folder back in his face and walked out. But I didn't. Instead, I let the silence hang between us, savoring the power shift. Ryan, the golden child, sat there silent. No arrogance, no entitlement, just fear. And if I don't? I asked, watching my father carefully. He exhaled deeply, his gaze falling. Then we lose everything. I tapped my nails against the folder. This was it, the moment I had been waiting for. They had underestimated me. They had discarded me. And now they were begging for my help. I'll think about it, I said smoothly, standing up. Ryan snapped his head up. Wait, what? Dad, she can't just... She can do whatever she wants. My father cut him off. Ryan's mouth snapped shut. I turned to leave. I had already won. And the best part? They still had no idea what I was going to do next. I didn't go back to Mitchell Enterprises. I didn't return their calls. I didn't respond to their emails. I ignored the increasingly desperate letters my father sent, each one more pleading than the last. I let them wait. I let them wonder. And while they were drowning in uncertainty, scrambling to fix the mess they had created, I made my final move. 1 month after that meeting, the news hit. Mitchell Enterprises officially filed for bankruptcy amid a leadership crisis. The article was brutal, detailing every failed acquisition, every mass departure, every sign of fractured leadership. Ryan's name was plastered across every headline, the face of the company's collapse. But what interested me most was the section about their assets. Mitchell Enterprises wasn't just falling apart, it was being sold off piece by piece. And I had been waiting for this moment. I sat in a sleek, modern conference room, watching as a team of lawyers and advisors finalized paperwork in front of me. The room hummed with quiet efficiency, a sharp contrast to the chaos unraveling inside Mitchell Enterprises. My lawyer slid the final contract across the table. It's official, he said. Your firm now owns Mitchell Enterprises' most valuable assets. I picked up the pen and signed my name. Just like that, I had taken everything my father had built, without him even realizing it was happening. Ryan had thought he was playing a game of power. My father had thought he was preserving his legacy. But the truth was, they had been playing checkers while I was playing chess. I didn't just take the company. I took the best clients. I took the most profitable divisions. I took the people who had built the business in the first place. And what was left? A hollow shell. A name with no value. A legacy that no longer belonged to them. I didn't expect my father to reach out again, but he did. I was sitting in my office when my assistant knocked softly. Miss Mitchell, she said cautiously, your father is here. I looked up from my desk, knowing exactly what was coming. I hadn't seen him in weeks. Send him in, I said. When he walked in, I hardly recognized him. He looked older, more worn down, like a man who had finally realized the depth of his losses. He stood there for a moment, taking in my office, my new company, my success. "You really did it," he said finally. "I did," I replied. A long silence settled between us. "You could have helped," he said, his voice tinged with regret. "You could have come back. We could have fixed it together." I leaned back in my chair, looking at him. "No, Dad," I said, my voice steady. "You could have fixed it, but you didn't want to. You wanted Ryan to be the golden child. You wanted to prove I wasn't necessary. And now—" I gestured around the room, my eyes cold. "You finally see what I've always known. It was never about the name. It was never about the company. It was always about the people who built it." His jaw tightened. He wanted to argue, to justify himself, to make excuses. But he couldn't. Because deep down, he knew I was right. "I made a mistake," he said, his voice low. For a brief moment, something inside me shifted. A part of me, the daughter who had once idolized him, wanted to forgive him. But then I remembered. I remembered how he had cast me aside, how every time I proved myself, he told me it was never enough. And just like that, the anger returned. I said nothing. Finally, he nodded. A silent, unspoken admission of defeat. Without another word, he turned and walked out of my office. This time, I didn't look back. I never needed Mitchell Enterprises. I never needed my father's approval. What I needed was the freedom to build something of my own. And that's exactly what I did. Power isn't given, it's taken. And in the end, I took everything.